Good evening, you're watching AnewZ. I'm Dilek. Here are the headlines. Ukraine proposes a new round of peace talks with Russia next week. In Poland, thousands took to the streets in anti-immigration marches, with counter-protesters rallying just meters away. Azerbaijan hosts the third edition of the Shusha Global Media Forum. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky says Kyiv has proposed a fresh round of peace talks with Russia. In his Saturday address, President Zelensky confirmed that Ukraine has invited Russia to resume peace negotiations next week. The talks would follow two previous rounds held in Istanbul, which led to prisoner swaps but no major breakthroughs. Zelensky urged Moscow to stop hiding from decisions and called for urgent steps toward a ceasefire.
Negotiation dynamics must increase. Everything must be done to achieve a ceasefire. The Russian side must stop avoiding decisions, the exchange of prisoners, the return of children, the cessation of killings. A meeting at the level of leaders is needed to truly ensure peace, a lasting peace. Ukraine is ready for such a meeting.
The Kremlin says President Putin remains open to peace talks over Ukraine, but insists Russia's objectives must be achieved. The comments come after US President Donald Trump issued a new ultimatum on Moscow. Kremlin spokesman Dmitry Peskov says Russia is ready to move swiftly toward a peace deal in Ukraine, but claims the process can't succeed without cooperation from the West. In an interview with State TV, he said Putin's goals remain clear and unchanging, despite recent US threats of new sanctions and a 50-day ceasefire deadline.
That was a deal. They don't want to.
Indeed, President Putin has repeatedly spoken of his desire to bring the Ukrainian settlement to a peaceful conclusion as soon as possible. This is a long process. It requires effort. It is not easy, and it seems Washington is increasingly coming to understand this. Russia is prepared to move swiftly. For us, the main thing is to achieve our objectives. They are clear, obvious, and unchanging. But the process doesn't depend solely on us.
Germany warns Russia may be soon capable of launching 2,000 drones at once toward Ukraine. The estimate from German General Christian Freuding comes as Moscow ramps up production of Iranian-designed Shahed drones. In June alone, Russia launched over 5,300 drones, setting daily records and striking even Ukraine's western regions. Ukraine is responding with its own drone expansion. Officials say Kyiv can build up to 4 to 8 million drones annually, but lacks full funding. Meanwhile, Germany has pledged hundreds of long-range weapons to Ukraine by the end of July. Tensions are rising in Poland as thousands took to the streets on Saturday in anti-immigration marches, with counter-protesters rallying just meters away. The demonstrations led by far-right forces come amid growing political pressure, a murder case, and new government measures at the border.
In Warsaw and more than 80 other cities, anti-immigration protesters rallied under the slogan "Stop Immigration," demanding tougher border controls and swift action from the government. Organised by the far-right Confederation Liberty and Independence Party, the marches drew support from nationalist groups sparked in part by public outrage after a 24-year-old woman was killed last month by a Venezuelan migrant in Torun. Across the road, counter-protesters held banners with slogans like "Accept the refugees, delete the fascists," a message directly aimed at the demonstrators. Police kept both sides apart. No major violence was reported.
I came here to show that we want peace in our country, that we have been an open country for many years. In fact, we Poles were refugees and emigrants to other countries for decades.
Smaller counter-demonstrations were also held in cities like Katowice, Krakow and Olsztyn. But in many towns, far-right protesters dominated, demanding the closure of borders with Ukraine, Belarus, Lithuania and Slovakia, and even calling for troops to guard Poland's frontiers.
What I fear most is that there is no force in Poland capable of standing up to this short of bringing the army out onto the streets.
Confederation Member of Parliament Przemysław Wypler blamed both the current and former governments for what he called a migrant crisis, accusing them of failing to protect Poland's borders.
We are protesting against the helplessness and weakness shown by the government. We need the implementation of the Fortress Europe plan, Fortress Poland.
Confederation leader Krzysztof Bosak went further, demanding Prime Minister Donald Tusk's resignation, the full closure of Poland's eastern borders, and even permission for soldiers to shoot at illegal crossers. His remarks drew strong backlash from opposition parties and rights groups. In May's presidential election, far-right candidates from Confederation finished third and fourth, a performance analyst linked directly to their anti-migration rhetoric. Just a day earlier, Poland and 5 other EU countries agreed to tighten asylum rules. German Chancellor Friedrich Merz welcomed Warsaw's move to reintroduce border checks, calling them necessary. Poland has now deployed controls at over 60 checkpoints with Germany and Lithuania. A new law also limits asylum claims from Belarus, a response to what Warsaw calls a hybrid attack by Belarusian President Alexander Lukashenko to destabilise the EU. On Saturday, the Interior Ministry said Poland had issued 40% fewer special protection permits this year compared to 2021, crediting stricter enforcement and faster procedures.
In Syria, a ceasefire has again been tested in the southern city of Sueda, where sectarian clashes between Druze fighters and Bedouin tribes have left hundreds dead. Government forces have now deployed to the region as international and regional actors step in, but tensions remain dangerously high.
Gunfire and shelling rocked Sueda despite the Syrian government's attempts to enforce a truce. Internal security forces were deployed across the province, including Al-Mazra'ah village, to separate warring factions after nearly a week of deadly fighting. The violence began on July 13th, following an assault on a Druze man by Bedouin tribesmen. What started as local retaliation quickly spiraled into full-scale clashes involving Druze militias, tribal fighters and government forces, drawing in Israeli airstrikes in Sueda and Damascus.
We are waiting for the government. If a deal is reached and everything is done, weapons, injured, the dead, then let it be. If not by 1 p.m, it's us against them. Either we all die or we take Sueda back.
Local hospitals have been overwhelmed. Doctors say most injuries came from mortars and bomb blasts, with dozens killed and hundreds more wounded. The Syrian Observatory for Human Rights claims the death toll may have surpassed 900. Interim President Ahmed al-Sharaa, who came to power after Bashar al-Assad's fall, announced a nationwide ceasefire Saturday, warning against sectarian incitement. He blamed Druze gunmen for revenge attacks and criticized Israeli airstrikes for destabilizing the country. The ceasefire plan includes 3 phases separating factions with internal security forces, opening humanitarian corridors to Dara, and restoring state control and law enforcement. While Israel claims its strikes are protecting Druze lives, it also accuses al-Sharaa of siding with perpetrators. The US, meanwhile, has supported a central Syrian state and helped broker the initial ceasefire, urging all sides to build a unified national identity.
Israel's military has issued a new evacuation warning for parts of central Gaza. The operation marks a shift into an area where ground troops have not previously entered. The Israeli Defense Forces are calling on civilians in southwestern Deir al-Balah to leave immediately, citing plans to begin ground operations there for the first time. According to a post on X by the IDF's Arabic language spokesperson, Avichai Adri, the military is expanding activity to target what it describes as terrorist infrastructure. Residents, including those in tents, are instructed by the military to relocate to the coastal area of Al-Mawasi for safety. The warning comes amid ongoing conflict in Gaza, where humanitarian conditions continue to worsen. At least 67 Palestinians have reportedly been killed while waiting for aid in northern Gaza. Health officials blame Israeli fire, but Israel's military says it's investigating.
Thousands of Palestinians walked long distances on Sunday to reach an aid distribution point in northern Gaza, with many returning carrying sacks of flour.
I came to get flour for my children because I have none at home. You know the situation here is difficult and the world watches without asking about us. That's why we take the risk ourselves, knowing it's a risk, with the chance we might not return.
Gaza's health ministry says at least 67 people were killed by Israeli fire while waiting for UN aid trucks, one of the highest reported death tolls in recent weeks. The number of casualties rose through the day, with more bodies arriving at Gaza City's Al-Shifa hospital. Those who gathered aid were relieved despite the tragic incident.
We came to eat and feed our children, after a month of not seeing or tasting bread. Thank God today we get a bag of flour. We are hungry, we need to eat.
Israel's military says it's checking the reports. It has repeatedly stated it seeks to avoid civilian harm and that its objective is to target Hamas fighters and free hostages taken in the October 7th attacks. According to Gaza health officials, more than 58,000 Palestinians have been killed in the conflict. Israeli authorities say nearly 1,650 Israelis and foreign nationals have died, including 1,200 in the Hamas attack that triggered the war.
Hundreds of Israelis have gathered outside Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's residence, calling for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza, a hostage exchange, and the resignation of the government. Protesters in Syria held photos of hostages and banners reading "Stop stalling and deal now," as they urged the Israeli government to act swiftly for a prisoner swap. Former soldiers and opposition figures joined the rally, where damaged vehicles from Gaza rocket fire were displayed. Israel says around 50 hostages remain in Gaza, 20 are believed to be alive. Meanwhile, over 10,800 Palestinians are held in Israeli prisons, with rights groups reporting deaths due to abuse and neglect. Rescue operations are still underway in Vietnam's Ha Long Bay after a tour boat capsized during a storm. The death toll has now climbed to 38. Search teams worked through the night, flipping the boat upright and calling out for any survivors. The vessel, carrying 53 people, overturned Saturday afternoon as Storm Wifa brought strong winds, rain and lightning to the area. Authorities say the storm, now moving closer to the northern coast, was one of the main causes of the disaster, one of the worst recent accidents in Ha Long Bay. Hong Kong has issued its highest storm warning as Typhoon Wifa brings hurricane force winds, flight chaos and transport disruption across the city to southern China.
Typhoon Wifa battered Hong Kong on Sunday, triggering the city's highest storm warning, the T10 alert, as winds exceeding 167 kilometers per hour swept across the territory. The eye wall of the storm passed just 50 to 60 kilometers south of Hong Kong, bringing torrential rain, powerful gusts and massive waves along the eastern coast of Hong Kong Island. More than 500 flights have been grounded and 400 others rescheduled. Ferry services were suspended and rail lines operating in open sections were halted. Schools and daycare centres closed and residents were urged to remain indoors. Temporary shelters opened across the city with at least one person injured and multiple reports of fallen trees. Neighbouring regions, including Macau and Shenzhen, also cancelled or delayed all daytime flights. As Wifa moved west towards southern China, Henan and Guangdong provinces were also placed on high alert. Further west, Vietnam braced for Wifa's arrival later this week, while the storm has already brought floods to the Philippines, where 2 people are reported missing. This is the first time Hong Kong has issued a T10 alert since Super Typhoon Saola struck in 2023.
Torrential rains continue to batter South Korea, triggering floods and landslides in several regions. The rising toll now includes 14 dead and at least 12 missing. In the northern county of Gapyeong of South Korea, 2 people have died and 2 remain missing after floods swept over bridges and triggered landslides. Rescue teams are still searching the area, as seen in the footage showing bridges buried under debris. The Sancheong County in the southeast, heavy rain caused a major landslide, leaving villages caked in mud. Excavators were deployed to clear debris. Since the downpours began on Wednesday, the extreme weather has left a growing trail of destruction across the country. At the third Shusha Global Media Forum held in the symbolic city of Shusha, global media experts, policymakers and innovators came together to tackle one urgent theme: how to strengthen media resilience in the digital age of AI.
Today, we don't just consume news, we navigate it. On the third Shusha Global Media Forum, this phrase is very often said by the media experts. In a time where truth competes with speed and facts must fight of space among feeds, the third Shusha Global Media Forum steps in not just as a global event, but as a response to a global media turning point. Held in the symbolic city of Shusha, a place of a cultural revival and strategic vision, the forum gathered voices from across the world and professionals, policymakers, academics and digital innovators, all converging under one vital theme: digital pathways, strengthening information and media resilience in the age of artificial intelligence. But what did that look like in the practice? Let's hear from the experts themselves.
Let's begin by saying that this issue is fundamental because the future of the Caucasus, like its past, depends on it. I deeply respect President Aliyev for saying that there are indeed no fundamental differences between Armenia and Azerbaijan in terms of national and political interests. The real problem lies in the ideology of occupation, an ideology that has long prevented our development. If Yerevan can overcome this, not in words but in action, then progress is possible. 2 points are key. First, the dissolution of the Minsk Group of OSCE. Why? Because the Minsk Group of OSCE is about the status of Karabakh, and there can be no question about the status of Karabakh. The second point concerns the Armenian constitution. It must no longer contain territorial claims against Azerbaijan. These two steps would form the foundation, but only the foundation, of a long process we call cooperation between Armenia and Azerbaijan, which is essential for building the future of the entire region.
Вот знаете, даже меня-то очень тронула история сбитого азербайджанского.
I was especially moved by the story of the Azal passenger plane that barely made it across the Caspian after being hit twice. When asked about it, the president answered openly, "Russia must take responsibility." He didn't hide from the consequences. He spoke plainly, even though it may carry political cost. One short phrase stood out to me: never give up. That message, I believe, applies to all people, all nations. In the early 1990s, Azerbaijan faced isolation, propaganda, disinformation, and had over 1 million refugees. 20% of its territory was gone, no hope in sight. The most painful question President Aliyev heard back then when visiting refugee camps was, "When will we return home?" Many are still haunted by that question. But yesterday's message was clear: never give up. The answer is in your heart and your actions. Don't wait for miracles. Act. Believe. That's why this forum touches me so deeply. It carries a different character this year, and it reminds us, we journalists must be brave, must write the truth, no matter the cost. President Aliyev inspired me yesterday to write even more openly.
So I found it very interesting when I asked President Aliyev where he thought the future trajectory of that relationship between Baku and Washington is going. And he was very frank that he viewed President Trump as someone who is bringing peace to the region. He expressed thanks and appreciation for President Trump's role in attempting to broker a finalized peace deal between Azerbaijan and Armenia. And I thought it was also very significant that President Aliyev mentioned the commonalities in values between the Trump administration and Azerbaijan and the Azerbaijani people. So given the fact that relations between the United States and Azerbaijan under President Biden were exceptionally poor, in fact, that was another point that was raised by President Aliyev yesterday, there seems to be renewed hope here in Azerbaijan that with President Trump in the White House, that this could be a new era of cooperation, perhaps even strategic cooperation between the two countries. So
at the third Shusha Global Media Forum, Azerbaijan raised serious concerns over systematic disinformation campaigns targeting the country. Presidential aide Hikmat Hajiyev told reporters that some of the world's most influential media outlets have played a leading role in spreading false narratives, often going beyond social media and AI platforms. He warned that deepfake technologies are now being used to distort the voices of Azerbaijani officials, while diaspora groups continue pushing historical and religious misinformation about Karabakh.
For the first time in human history, there is a second thinking platform outside the human brain. That is, we must distinguish artificial intelligence not only from social media and algorithms, but also from what is known as machine learning technology. This system receives information, processes vast amounts of data, thinks independently, and makes its own decisions. It can even influence algorithmic processes. In this case, could professional journalism itself become susceptible to the manipulative elements of artificial intelligence? Yes, it is a vast and complex topic. That is why today, one of the important tasks for Azerbaijani media is to study artificial intelligence. When we meet with media leaders, whether in television or online media, we are already discussing the application of artificial intelligence in daily operations and studying international practices. If we look at translation work today, especially in the provision of voiceovers in the Azerbaijani language, while certain technical aspects are still not quite where we want them to be, in foreign languages, such as Russian and English, there have been good results in terms of providing translation. And these technologies are already being applied on several of our media platforms. I can even mention one example. We conducted an experiment within the Azerbaijani media, publishing an article generated entirely by artificial intelligence on one of the country's leading news platforms. But no one was able to tell the difference, whether it was written by AI or by a journalist. This in itself is part of a much broader discussion.
Our very own Orkan Amashov is with us live again from Azerbaijan's Shusha to walk us through the key outcomes of the second day of the Shusha Global Media Forum. Orkan, good evening. Now, what were the main themes and standout moments and outcomes of the day two in the Shusha Global Media Forum?
Hello, good evening, Tilak. As day two of the third Shusha Global Media Forum is drawing to an end, the participants are already preparing for day three, which is going to be incredibly eventful with three panel discussions in the pipeline waiting, and everybody here that I've spoken to earlier have been discussing the major themes of those very panels. Of course, artificial intelligence, its impact on journalism, the question to what extent we are actually manipulated by the manipulator which we have created ourselves, the question of proper use, media ethics, and many other elements have been discussed today. Today was an opening day. We heard from Mr. Hikmat Hajiyev earlier, and I spoke to you about that particular message of his made first thing in the morning. And then, of course, there was the first panel where our colleague Ubishab Panda was one of the panelists. And then the second part of the day, the 140 participants from 52 countries and local journalists as well. They visited Agdam and they visited different places, including Imarat Complex, the railway bus station, and also the many other places, including villages. Fundamentally, when you connect media literacy with the location of this global media forum, you would understand one underlying factor which has been reiterated today. During that period, spanning from 2020 to 2023, when a certain part of Karabakh was still under separatist control, Azerbaijan itself faced media manipulation, fake news, as President Al-Hamali mentioned yesterday and his assistant reiterated today. And therefore, it seems to make a great deal of sense to host this media forum
forum in a place the past of which is associated with these manipulative attacks against Azerbaijan, and also, of course, artificial intelligence. It's dual use. Its use which would favor professional media standards, and its use would go against the grain of media principles, are to be taken into account as part of the self-same scope. And I think that that was clearly mentioned by many analysts and many experts today. Just allow me to mention, we got, as I mentioned earlier, about 140 participants from 42 countries, and they are media professionals, they are journalists, they are anchors, they are media executives, and also some of them are actually entrepreneurs. Some of them are thought leaders, they are bloggers. And the discussions that we have had today, in particular during the first half of the day, were largely dominated by one key sensibility. It's possible to disagree about a number of things when it comes to modern media, but there's one fundamental thing that everybody seems to agree, and that is unwavering and apparently long-term impact to artificial intelligence, because as I mentioned earlier today, it's a first platform, technological platform, which is capable of thinking. Artificial intelligence does not have soul, it's not capable of being heard, it does not have feelings, but it has intelligence. And that is created by us, but that intelligence is now in such a state that our own intelligence is no longer impervious to it. But the fundamental instinct here is that instead of being reactionary, I think that some of the linchpins, precepts of progress must be maintained. But tomorrow we will have 3 more panel discussions. My colleague Kate Wilson will be moderator in one of them, and I'll be back with my reflections, and we'll have an opportunity to converse later, Dilek.
Okay, Orkan, thank you so much for the roundup, and we'll talk to you again tomorrow. Archaeological work continues in Turkey's Kahramanmaraş, where new discoveries from the late Bronze Age have been made. At Yassı Mound, a team has unearthed structures and silos believed to be used for storage, sparking hopes of finding written sources.
In the Afshin district of Kahramanmaraş, excavations at Yassı Mound are revealing important clues from ancient times. Teams have uncovered parts of a large structure and storage silos thought to date back to the late Bronze Age or Hittite period. Excavation director says this season brought new excitement as a 2-phase building process was identified, including signs of renovation. A number tablet was previously found at the site, possibly a form of receipt. This has fueled hopes of discovering more written records, especially from the Assyrian trade colonies period.
We're also experiencing the excitement of wondering, are we getting closer to written sources? Will we uncover any tablets or other findings?
Over the years, findings from multiple periods have emerged at the mound, from a Roman basilica to a Persian-era administrative complex. Experts believe the site may reveal even earlier history as they carefully sift through layers dating back to 6000 BC.
That's all we have from Baku for now. Stay tuned to AnewZ for more updates, and have a lovely evening.